welcome back to the Dan Corder Show. South Africa is a movie. This is the watch party. And for our final big interview of the year, we are so thrilled to welcome somebody who for the longest time has been, in my opinion, one of the phenomenal journalists, researchers, and frankly, comedy writers. Like, I remember when he wrote an article directly comparing Jacob Zuma's ANC to the Empire in Star Wars. And there was like Darth Vader jokes happening. And whether you agreed with this position or not, phenomenal writer, please make some noise for the absolutely extraordinary Richard Poplak is here.
Thank you. Very good to be here.
You wrote an article in late November about how everything we're seeing Donald Trump do, Jacob Zuma did first. He wrote the playbook for this style of politics. And they got a lot of people yapping extensively in different directions. Just give me the core argument for people who've not read the piece yet.
Well, you know, I mean, the funny thing about Jacob Zuma is how smart he is. Or I almost said was, but I mean, as you know, he's still very much a part of our politics. But what was so interesting about his time in office was the fact that he reconceived the state to be almost a capture machine, right? So this term, state capture, something that, you know, wasn't particularly new, but was perfected by Zuma and his administration and his cronies. So what you're starting to see in especially the second Trump administration is a lot of American analysts start to use the term state capture.
Really?
Yeah, because what's happening? You're having these oligarchs or cronies inserted as middlemen who are there to capture the flow of money coming from the state down to the bureaucracies, right? And that's exactly what Jacob Zuma did. When he understood that he and his cronies would be cut off from the formal economy, what they did, I mean, there's dozens of different terms for it, but effectively what he did is that he set up a capture machine right at the middle. And so all the money coming out of the state was captured by these middlemen. Some of it trickled down into the state-owned enterprises. Most of it was taken to Dubai and put in hotels and very large mansions.
And when we talk about Trump trying to do that scheme now, are we talking about our dearly beloved ex-Pretoria Boys High alum Elon Musk as part of that?
The greatest South African of all time.
The greatest.
Yeah,
the
he's
greatest.
done some. He's got
a
hand for Elon Musk. Don't no clapping for Elon Musk.
Settle down.
I mean, you know, Elon Musk is famous for helping out on PayPal and then creating an iPad on wheels. I don't know if you've ever driven a Tesla, but they're horrible. But effectively, that's exactly what this DOGE department is devised to do.
It's not a department.
Pardon me, it's not a department. God, you're not allowed to say that.
You're
right. You're right.
It's not a department.
Yeah.
It's Donald and friends on his golf course.
Yeah,
making decisions about bureaucratic changes to the U.S. government.
Yeah, it's a kitchen cabinet where you know. Where everybody, talks in acronyms and, defers to AI.
Yes.
But effectively, that's exactly what they're doing. Zuma was always conceived of as a leftist. He was always thought of as a leftist populist. But if you think about what he actually did, is that he privatized the state. I mean, that is what middlemen do. They act as private agents, right, who interrupt the flow of money going to state-owned enterprises and into bureaucracies. Any massive state, like South Africa or the United States, functions on its bureaucracy. I mean, I don't know if Elon Musk thinks that this is all magic, but you flush the toilet, right? When you turn on the taps, not in South Africa, but when you turn on the taps, water comes out of it, right? These systems in which what we describe as civilization are immensely complex, but they're also immensely expensive. And so Zuma's sort of notion was, let's capture that flow. And in a much more sophisticated and in a much larger way, that's exactly what's happening with American Zuma and his people. Yeah, the orange Zuma.
Yeah, exactly. As we call him on the show, the demented Nazi.
Yeah.
Okay, so there were three other parts of your piece that I found really interesting. The first one is you speak about the bait and switch. So in Richard's article, he talks about the fact that the way that Zuma's people got different factions got Busisiwe Mkhwebane to become the public protector, was they floated a much worse option, and we all went, no, not that person, no. And then that made it easier for them to get through Mkhwebane because everyone was like, well, thank God it's not that guy. So how has Trump been doing that recently?
Well, I think the obvious, I'm sure your audience is familiar with some of the surgically modified humans who have been promulgated as various candidates for his administration. But I mean, I think the most famous is Matt Gaetz.
Yes.
You have a guy on whose forehead you could project an IMAX showing of Moana 2. And that's his best quality. His worst quality is that he seemed to be grooming a bunch of teenage girls by, in sort of various ways. And he was renowned for that. Then there was an ethics report supposed to come out, and Trump nominates him, puts him forward as his pick for Attorney General, an immensely powerful position in the United States. And in this case, one devised as the primary agent of vengeance against Trump's enemies. But this guy is so totally foul, loathed by all his colleagues, there was just simply no way he was going to get by. And so someone else drifts out. And I think the Florida Attorney General has been put forward for that. She drifts into the picture, and by comparison looks amazing.
Yeah.
She's the Busisiwe of America.
So they get her in.
Yeah, so they get her in. And that kind of bait and switch or flood the zone type tactics, while hardly devised by Zuma, were used very well by him, and we could see this stuff being used again in the United States.
Interesting. And then in the piece, you also talk about two very, very, like anybody who's followed American politics knows that what Trump does, despite being unbelievably powerful, is he presents himself as a perpetual victim.
Yeah.
Like he's very good at going, everyone's coming after me, even though like he's got the most extraordinary power to wield. And you see that in exactly what Zuma has done and maybe still does. I mean, he still is trying to convince us that the election was rigged without evidence, that there's a big, agenda out against him.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is exactly it. Now, I mean, what we constantly heard from Zuma, even though he was deputy president for 9 years and then president for another 9 years. I mean, this was one of the most powerful men in this country's history, right? The perpetual victim, always playing the victim card. And that's exactly what Trump has done as well. Now, there's no question that the Justice Department in the United States and our courts here in South Africa have respectively gone after these men for very good reasons. And at times for not so good reasons, I'll give them that. But this casting them as the victim, and by extension, their supporters as victims, allows any sort of progressive notion of identity politics to be neutered right at the core. Because, well, we're victims. We identify with the victim. There's nothing you can say to us. And there's no other victimhood that is valid in the face of our massive, all-consuming victimhood.
I see. Now that we hear the fullness of your arguments, there are two things that I know that people disagree with you would say. The first one is state capture didn't happen. And the scale of the Zondo Commission and the scale of all the evidence is actually proof of the great machine fighting against Zuma to try and bury him. Like every person who comes after him is more proof that he is the victim and our champion fighting against the elite state. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, the evidence, and I know evidence is a dirty word in 2024, but the evidence suggests otherwise. I mean, state capture was this machine that slurped up trillions of dollars of South Africa's wealth. We can see the effects on the ground now. The fact that there's no water infrastructure in the city any longer. The fact that we barely had any electricity for 3 years. The fact that so many of our institutions are in complete disarray is evidence of the fact that there was state capture. Now, it is very, very, very easy to break a country. And it is very, very hard to fix it.
Okay.
And that is the process that we're undergoing right now. And I think it's this notion that, well, state capture never happened. There's a whole bunch of things that show us that it's actually and the formal economy in this country is corrupt. The formal economy in this country, your Investex, your big banks, your Santon, all of those institutions are exclusionary. And there is an ideological argument to be made for the fact that the Constitution doesn't serve average South Africans. Sure, we can make all of those arguments. But it's worth remembering that the Constitution is a piece of paper, right? And it's implementation, it's honesty in government, it's actual governance that is the only thing that is going to get us through. And any nonsense about the fact that there wasn't state capture or that state capture was at some level fair and evening the playing field is just another excuse for shoddy governments lying and cheating.
Yo, preacher Poplak. Guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. And that's exactly what the Americans are going to find out very shortly, if they already haven't.
And my final question for you from the haters gallery, Richard Poplak, is, aren't all politicians just like this? Isn't Ramaphosa doing this too?
Yes. I mean, there is no space for someone like Zuma or someone like Trump to say, well, screw them all. Let's burn it all down. If everything was working so beautifully.
I see.
I mean, look at Ramaphosa's career. Look at what he did in the private sector. Look at who his friends were. Look at how he earned his money and how he became a billionaire. Okay? Look at what he did with Lonman on the ground during the Marikana massacre.
Yeah.
All of which, or let me say, none of which has been addressed. And then there's this small incident where some people found some money in his couch. I mean, who doesn't keep money in their furniture? And so, yeah, I mean, of course, it's the fact that our good guys are so rotten that allows the really seriously, shamelessly bad actors to sneak in, pretend that they're victims, pretend that the establishment is rigged against them, it isn't, and pretend that, well, if everyone's rotten, why the heck shouldn't we be rotten?
Richard Poplak for president, actually. Richard Poplak, thank you so much for being here. We really, really appreciate it.